Hello everyone, my name is Brennan Marr. That noise you're hearing is my ventilator. And welcome to Page Turners They Were Not, my Star Wars podcast. Happy New Year everyone. I'm recording this on January 1st, 2020. I'm a little under the weather, so if I sound really stuffy, that's why. But today, I would like to do my spoiler review of the season finale of The Mandalorian. Episode 8, Redemption. Or should I say, Chapter 8, Redemption. So, I hope that everyone was able to enjoy that episode. As I said, this is a spoiler review. So you've been warned. Here we go. This episode is directed by Taika Waititi, who also plays IG-11. Now, Taika is the director of Thor Ragnarok, and is also this year the director of Jojo Rabbit. He also directed a wonderful film called The Hunt for the Wilder People, starring Sam Neill, that I would highly recommend. A wonderful bit of New Zealand cinema. So, the episode opens with these scout troopers who have kidnapped Baby Yoda, or the child, or the asset, whatever they call him. This scene, I feel, went on a little bit too long. It did feel like something more out of Troops, which is a Star Wars parody film. And I think it's meant to evoke that kind of feeling. Apparently the actors who are voicing the Stormtroopers are well known. I'm not exactly sure who they are, so I'm not really going to get into that, but I didn't particularly enjoy how long that scene played out. It makes sense to open with them, with the child. And they're both wondering what the child is and why it's so important. Which is actually pretty interesting. But it goes on a little bit too long. But then IG-11 shows up and gives them what for. And takes the baby and takes one of the speeder bikes of these stormtroopers. He heads toward the town, where he takes out some of the guards. But in between the scene of IG-11 collecting the child and showing up in town, we go back to where we left off, with Mando, Cara Dune, and Greef Karga trapped by Moff Gideon. Let me just say that Moff Gideon, Giancarlo Esposito, it's a wonderful performance and a memorable character. And he has that sort of demeanor of, I know everything about you guys. And we learn that he works for the Imperial Security Bureau. Kind of like their version of the FBI. And he was present. Or at least is aware of when the Empire destroyed the Mandalorians. In an event called the Night of 1,000 Years. I don't know much about that, but he refers to a siege of Mandalore. I don't think he's talking about the Republic siege of Mandalore. I think he's talking about the Imperial siege of Mandalore. His troops set up an E-Web heavy repeating blaster, which you might recognize from The Empire Strikes Back. It's the weapon that the snowtroopers were attempting to set up to stop the Falcon from taking off. Of course, they were mowed down. But I like that it appears again. I like some of the stuff that we learn in this scene. Moff Gideon, being a member of the ISB, knows a lot about our characters. We learn that Cara Dune is an Alderaanian. We learned that her real name is Cara Cynthia or something like that. It's a little bit different. I got the article right here. Cara Cynthia. We learned that Greef Karga is some sort of magistrate. I'm not exactly sure what that means. We also learned the Mandalorian's name. It's Din Djarin. And we finally learned what his name is, which I think is very interesting. Gideon tries to mark a deal, and they consider it, or at least Greef Karga does. But Mando is like, no, I don't think so. We learned also that Mando was not born on Mandalore. We then get a flashback to Mando, or Din Djarin, being rescued during a battle with the Separatists during the Clone Wars by some Mandalorians. Now, I'll explain a little bit of this later, but one of the Mandalorians has an insignia on his shoulder of a group called Death Watch, which is part of the Mandalorian story arc in the Clone Wars animated series. So more on that in a minute. We also learned that Mandalorians are not a race, they are a creed. He was adopted by the Mandalorians. He later swore to be one of them. Gideon, of course, wants the child. We're still not sure why. Then IG-11 shows up. All hell breaks loose. Our characters have to escape with Baby Yoda stomping a flamethrower and allowing them to escape. And also, Mando is worried that he's dying, but he's not going to allow Cara Dune to take his helmet off. So the others leave. IG-11 stays behind, and IG-11 convinces Mando to take his helmet off, as IG-11 states, I'm not a living thing. I guess the Mandalorian rules is that no other person sees the Mando's face when they're sworn to the creed. But IG-11 points out a loophole. He takes off Mando's helmet, and we actually get to see Din Djarin. Get to see Pedro Pascal. I was very happy to see him. IG-11 heals him up, and then they join the others in the sewers, where they see lots of the armor of Mandalorians who were killed. The priestess, the female Mandalorian, shows up. And she makes an insignia for him, which is the Mudhorn. And instructs Mando that he needs to basically adopt Baby Yoda until he can reunite him with his own people. Now, the priestess also talks about the Jedi. Mando seems to be unaware of the Jedi, which has not been explained yet, given that the but maybe because their culture was destroyed before Mando really got to learn those things as a member of their society. So I'm sure we'll get a little bit more on that. So anyhow, they go along and they find a boat on a lava river, which the droid takes them downstream. If you can call it a screen. And IG-11, seeing that their way is blocked by TIE fighters, sacrifices himself to blow up the... I'm sorry. He sees that their way is blocked by stormtroopers, on which he sacrifices his life to kill the stormtroopers and allow our heroes to get through safely. However, Moff Gideon has returned to his TIE fighter and he's strafing them. You know, a little bit of a North by Northwest kind of moment. Mando has been given a rocket pack by the priestess. You know, fulfilling that line when he says, I gotta get one of those. He says he trained with it as a child, and the priestess, or armorer, I'll just call her priestess, says, you know, won't obey your commands unless you train with it. Now, he flies with it, but not very well, but he is able to stop Moff Gideon. By planting detonation charges, Moff Gideon's TIE fighter crashes. Mando decides that now that all their enemies are taken out of the way, he needs to return the baby to his family, or to his people. And Cara Dune and Grief Karga decide to stay behind. And Mando takes off. Then we get the moment that I think most of the big fans are talking about. Moff Gideon crawls out of the wreckage of his TIE fighter. Or should I say, he slices his way out of the wreckage with a very interesting weapon, the Darksaber. Now, I think to a lot of viewers, it's just another weapon. But to those who know, this is a big deal. So let me explain it really briefly. The Mandalorians and the Jedi fought against each other anciently. But there was a time, thousands of years before the movies, when a Mandalorian named Tar Vizsla joined the Jedi Order, in which he created a unique lightsaber called the Darksaber. A very particular weapon with a very interesting blade that's black. He used this to unite the peoples of Mandalore under his banner, declaring himself the Mandalore. After he died, the lightsaber was kept in the Jedi Temple. 1,000 years before the movie, some descendants of Tar Vizsla took the Darksaber back. During the events of the Clone Wars, the Darksaber was in the hands of Pre-Vizsla. Oddly enough, voiced by Jon Favreau, who's the showrunner on The Mandalorian. And wrote this episode, by the way. The Darksaber then passed to Darth Maul. That's a long story, I'm not going to get into it here. Suffice to say, Maul conquered Mandalore with the help of a group called Death Watch. The Mandalorian society had gone for a pacifist approach during the events of the Clone Wars. Basically, turning away from their warrior past. The Death Watch was a group that wanted to return Mandalore to its former ways. They allied themselves with Darth Maul and took back Mandalore. The Darksaber then became Maul's, wherein later, during the events of Star Wars Rebels, it was taken by Sabine Wren, who trained with it, who then passed it to Bo-Katan Kryze. Bo-Katan then became the Mandalore. And that is the last that we know of the Mandalorian culture and of the Darksaber until it appears in the hands of Moff Gideon. As I said, Gideon was present on Mandalore when the Empire destroyed that culture. So he took the Darksaber. Whether he killed Bo-Katan, we don't know. We'll find out. I think Bo-Katan will probably appear in the show at some point as a character who's the Mandalore or something to that effect. So we'll see what happens. Now, it is very interesting that the Mandalorian, when he was young, was rescued by members of Death Watch. Death Watch was allied with Count Dooku and the Separatists. But as we see in the flashback, the people who were attacking the Mando's family were Separatists, so it was Death Watch not allied with Separatists. Death Watch fighting against them. So something happened where members of Death Watch were not allied with the Separatists. I don't think that's a continuity error because the guys who are running the show, Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau, were the guys who were running Clone Wars when it explained the Death Watch. At least Dave Filoni was running it. Oh, and leader of Death Watch was voiced by Jon Favreau. So that will probably be explained, and I don't think it's a continuity error. I think they're very purposeful about this. They love the Mandalorians. So that's basically a summary of the episode. I really, really like this episode. It ends the series with a bang. I only have one or two nitpicks, which is how could IG-11 walk in lava, but, whatever. And how is it that Mando doesn't know about the Jedi, but I'm sure that will be explained. By the way, the priestess gets a fight where she kills a bunch of stormtroopers with her forge tools, which is pretty cool. So, this is a great episode. Taika does a great job. I am so excited for next season, and I am very, very pleased overall with what they've created here. Jon Favreau has demonstrated that Star Wars live action does work on streaming. This is a fabulous episode, some great character development. We learn more about the characters. I think Gina Carano gets more to do. Our characters, as always, are fantastic and bombastic. It was so cool to see Din Djarin's face. So that we, the audience, get to see it, but no other living person has. I figured that it would be the episode directed by Taika Waititi would see his character, IG-11, save the day. And maybe change Mando's mind a little bit about droids. Because he's always been a little bit salty to IG-11. So anyhow, fabulous episode, fabulous conclusion. Let me know what you guys think. I hope that my explanation of some of Mandalorian history has made sense. But for reference, I would say check out Star Wars The Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels, both of which are on Disney Plus right now. So that's my review, spoiler review, of The Mandalorian Chapter 8 Redemption. If all goes well and I'm feeling up to it, tomorrow will be the day that I do talk about some 10 of my favorite films of the decade, as our decade just drew to a close yesterday. And on Friday, I will be handing out some awards for some of the events that are famous and infamous in movies this last year. So stay tuned for those things, and most likely, I will probably see Star Wars again on the weekend and will be able to give my full review next week. Most likely on Monday, now that The Mandalorian has concluded for now. Well, my name is Brendan Marr, that noise you hear is my ventilator, and thank you so much for tuning in. The page turners they were not, my Star Wars podcast. May the Force be with you.